Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends! Welcome to Crime Will Tell. Thanks for hanging out with us today. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Jamie.
Our case today involves the tragic and untimely death of Jerry Mork. So his name was Gerald Mork. He went by Jerry.
Okay.
And this was suggested by my good friend and loyal listener, Courtney.
Hey, girl.
Hey, Courts. And this one's a doozy.
Of course.
The suspected murderer was Courtney's mother's brother.
Oh, shit. So her uncle?
Yeah, I was waiting for it to. So, yes, I
like,
said the same thing. So she was like,
I had to do a family tree real quick. And be
yeah,
like,
I did the same thing. And I was like, yes. She's like, yeah. So the suspected murderer, you should do this one. And by the way, the suspected murderer is my mother's brother. And I said, so then that would be your uncle, yes? And her response was like, I guess he was my uncle. I suppose if that's how family fucking trees work. Yes. So her preference is that this is her mother's brother. The suspected murderer was her mother's brother.
Gotcha. Okay. Damn.
But before we dive in, just a really quick shout out to give kudos to our friend V, who designed our new logo. And she did a great job. And she really captured us.
Yes, she did.
Smushed it all into, as she said, she just smushed us into a new logo. So thanks, V.
Yes, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, my friend.
Clink. Okay, so today I'm taking us to Iola, Wisconsin.
Oh.
So Iola, which is right next to Wapaka, so for everybody from a geographical perspective, it's situated about 2.5 hours drive north of Milwaukee. And it's about a 45 to 50 minute drive to Appleton. So that's kind of where we're situated if you were looking at a map. Iola is a small village. It's a little itty-bitty. It has about 1,000 residents. And it's most famous for its annual Iola Old Car Show.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this car show has been going on for years and years and years. It's usually held in mid-July. It's a multi-day event. I think it goes on for 3 days. And it's one of the largest car shows in the United States.
No shit.
Yep, happens right there in Little Iola.
Well, when is it? Let's go.
Well, it's mid-July and no thank you. So it's quite popular and it draws tens of thousands of spectators. So my no thank you isn't because I don't want to see old, awesome cars, because the cars there are phenomenal. I mean, it's an old car show. People work for years restoring cars just so that they can show them at the Iola Old Car Show. What I don't like is the tens of thousands of spectators that show up every year and onto Iola. Yeah. And then they hang out and they cause ruckus for 3 days and then they scram. So I'm not interested in the crowd piece of it. Again, like I said, it's quite popular. It draws tens of thousands of spectators. I suppose they would be expecting spectators, yes. And our story begins during this car show in the early morning hours of Sunday, July 14th, 1985.
Okay, wow.
So as you can imagine, it was pretty rowdy. There were about 85,000 people in 1985 that came from all over to attend this car show in Iola.
Damn.
85,000 people descending on a town of about 1,000.
That is crazy.
That's a lot of people. So there's general rabble-rousing going on, people partying in the streets. Well, nobody's sleeping. Everybody's out. People are just up. Alcohol, drugs, you name it. A handful of fights have been reported as customary. You get all amped up and you got some adrenaline and some excitement. You throw some stimulants in there. And
You get excited over a car, you get a big old
yeah,
car boner, and then you get crazy.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, all of this kept the Iola's extraordinarily small police department very, very busy, along with county deputies kind of coming in and helping to, fill the surge. And they were putting in really long hours. They were working overtime just to keep the peace and do what they could to ensure the community's safety, everyone's safety. Around 5 a.m., James Niesler, who was a sergeant with the Wapaka County Sheriff's, I always say Wapaki, and I don't mean to say Wapaki, the Wapaka County Sheriff's Office, started to become concerned. He had been calling Jerry on the radio, and Jerry wasn't responding. And when you call an officer on the radio repeatedly and that officer doesn't respond, especially when that officer is on duty, as Jerry was,
Oy.
that's cause for concern. It's highly unusual, and like it just didn't sit right with Sergeant Niesler. So he hopped into his patrol car and he went looking for Jerry. Because again, this is a very small area. Perhaps a fight broke out and he was outnumbered, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's scary.
At about 5:20 a.m., he was driving past the cemetery, the Riverside Cemetery, when he spotted a police squad car parked along the northern end of the driveway of the cemetery, so the driveway going in and out of the cemetery,
Mhm.
and it was sitting there with its headlights on. So, Sergeant Niesler is like, "Oh, something active is going on here. Okay, well, maybe this is Jerry. I'll stop by and take a look." When he drove into the cemetery and pulled up to the patrol car, he found Jerry lying on the ground next to the car, face down, not moving. The
Fuck.
car's engine was running, and on the ground next to Jerry's body was his flashlight, which was still on.
Ugh.
Jerry's police issued revolver was in its holster, but it was still snapped in. So clearly he wasn't going for his revolver because it was
Right.
still safely snapped into the holster.
Ugh.
So Sergeant Niesler was like, fuck. So he immediately called it in and he reported the scene. Chief Deputy Robert Andrasco, who worked for the same department Sergeant Niesler worked for, because Sergeant Niesler called it in to his department, which again was the Wapaka County Sheriff's Department, learned of the situation around 5:30 a.m. So Sergeant Niesler pulls up to the scene, takes this all in about 5:20, and within 10 minutes, his chief deputy, Robert Andrasco, was aware of the situation. And so Chief Andrasco was like, well, holy hell, we're going to need some help with this one. Now we've got a police officer down and we don't know what's going on. He didn't radio in his location. And so the next thing he did was he contacted the Wisconsin Department of Justice for help with the investigation. Because he's like,
Okay.
look, when it's your own police officer, you need help.
Just so I'm picturing everything. Was there blood or anything at the scene? Like, was there something that made him think that he, like, out of the gate had been hurt by someone else?
Yeah. So the reporting on this case is extraordinarily scarce. There's like
Okay.
very limited sources, and the information in those sources is limited. I had the same question because nowhere in my research did that come up.
Really? Okay.
However, you will learn there had to have been blood.
Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to get off
That's
track.
okay. No, it's a good question because maybe he had a heart attack. Maybe he had a diabetic emergency. Maybe he fainted. I don't know. Maybe he tripped over something and knocked himself out. Who knows? It could be a number of things if there aren't any outward signs of physical trauma, but that wasn't the case. So within a few hours of Sergeant Niesler discovering Jerry's body, a crime scene investigation was in full gear. And it was a collaboration between the Wapaka County Sheriff's Department and the State Crime Lab. And initially, they found two 380 caliber casings at the scene. They found one under Jerry's head, and they found another near his knees.
Okay.
They also learned that a man by the name of Thomas Dorr, who lived in Ogdensburg, which is, I don't know, it's not by Iola. He was in Iola for the car show. He was sitting with some friends on a bench on Main Street around 4 a.m. that same Sunday morning when he saw an Iola police car turn onto Main Street. And then he watched that car turn onto State Highway 161 going towards where Riverside Cemetery is.
Okay.
A few minutes after that first police car turned onto State Highway 161, he saw a second police car follow the first car onto State Highway 161, again, going into the same direction as the cemetery. A few minutes after seeing this, Thomas Dorr reported that they heard a loud bang, like something like sounded like a large firecracker. And then shortly after that, around 4:30 a.m., they saw an Iola police car drive back by them, coming from the same direction that the first two police cars were going in.
Wow. Okay.
And Dorr waved at the police officer driving that car because he recognized him as Police Chief Michael Schurz. So
Okay.
he was like, oh, hey, I know who that is. So he gave him a wave.
That's all shirts.
So let me take a beat here and let me share a little bit about Jerry Mork. So he was young when this happened. He was born September 16th, 1953, and he was only 31 when he was murdered.
Oh,
He was
shit.
very young. He was still a baby. His dad was actually Sheriff William Mork. So he followed in his father's footsteps when he joined the police force. And I bet you there was a lot of pride there.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And from
Oh.
all accounts, William Mork is a very upstanding individual, very good at his job, that kind of thing. Jerry had graduated from the police academy and had been with the Iola Police Department as an officer for 8 months when he was
Oh,
killed.
that's it. Damn.
That's it. The only other full-time officer was Police Chief Michael Schurz, who was 38 at the time, and that was Jerry's boss.
Mm.
Jerry was married. He had a wife. He had two littles, one that was age
Mm.
6 and one that was age 2. He was active in his church. He served as Iola's fire chief, and he served as an EMT. He was a member of the JCs, the Wapaka County Divers Association, and the Wapaka County Firemen's Association.
Damn. So he was just first responder across the board. He
Yeah.
was your guy.
It was like his
Wow.
calling. It was
Mm.
really, really, and it was a lot of these are volunteer. And so
Yeah.
he was really just doing it because that's what drove him. It was his passion. He also had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, a mom, host of friends, his dad, Sheriff William Mork. And he was well known because of his role in the fire department and the police department. And even before that, he had a company. And so the effects of his murder were widespread.
Right.
And then it gets even more shocking as we go along. Because anytime you hear about things that come up with like law enforcement or shady shit with law enforcement, it just kind of gives you that feeling because they're humans just like us. They're not perfect, but they've chosen a profession where they take an oath and they are held to a higher standard, I think, than the normal lay people like you and me,
Yeah.
right, wrong, or otherwise. I think that's just psychology, like the human nature of it.
Yeah.
Tom Hansen, a friend and former colleague of Jerry's, was quoted in a Wapaka County News article dated June 27th, 2012, in reference to recalling the impact the murder of Jerry had on the Iola community. So he was referring to that when he said, quote, "It was very tragic for the community, the entire county. He was outgoing, fun-loving, and very family-oriented. He thought the world of his kids. He was hardworking, honest, caring. I don't know anybody that he wouldn't give the shirt off his back to help."
Except shirts.
He might give him his pants, but not
Yeah.
his shirt.
He's like, you're good on shirts, man. Here's some shorts.
Before joining the police force, Jerry ran a construction business.
Okay.
And he hired Tom Hansen right after Tom Hansen got out of the military. So Hansen served in the military, he came back, Jerry hired him, and they worked together building homes, building additions to homes, installing roofs. And then Hansen, he went on to join the Iola Police Department and worked with Jerry, but Hansen was just a part-time police officer. That wasn't like his full-time gig. He had another gig, and then he just kind of did this part-time police work on the side because that's what small rural communities do.
Yeah, yeah.
In 1986, he became Iola's police chief and served in that capacity until 2006. So he had served after all this shit went down. He was sworn in as the police chief for Iola, and then he served in that capacity for 20 years.
Damn.
Until 2006. So as the Wapaka County Sheriff, really? Wapaki? Carrie, get it together. So as the Wapaka County Sheriff's Department and the State Crime Lab processed the murder scene, Jerry's father, Sheriff William Mork, was hanging out at Pelican Lake. It was Sunday. He was out at Pelican Lake for the weekend, enjoying it, having a time with some friends.
Yeah. He's like, I'm avoiding all those car motherfuckers.
Yeah, I'm getting the hell out of town with the old car show going on. He received a call from a sergeant from the Oneida County Sheriff's Department. Oneida County is where Pelican Lake is located.
Okay.
And that sergeant had the really awesome task, said no one ever, to tell him, hey, you need to know that your son Jerry uh, has passed away. Basically, is like he had to notify him that his son was killed. And so Sheriff Mork was like, so he immediately got into his car and he started to drive back to Wapaka. It's about a 90-mile drive. So I don't know, a couple of hours away. And Sheriff Mork decided, you know what, when he was driving, he was like, I really shouldn't participate in this investigation because I just don't think that I could be clear headed and objective and not be emotional since this is my son. So he
Right.
abstained from participating at all in the investigation and he completely stayed out of it.
Okay.
According to the Wapaka Now news article that I referenced earlier, another discovery was made when on day 3 of the investigation, officers found a spent .380 caliber round. So
Mm.
before they found 2 casings, on day 3 they found an actual spent round buried in the ground near where Jerry's body had been found.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Forensic analysis indicated that this bullet was old and had likely been manufactured sometime during the 1960s or possibly even earlier, but more likely sometime during the 1960s.
Hmm.
Further analysis revealed that this bullet was, quote, consistent with having been fired from an Italian Beretta model 1934 .380 caliber.
Well, damn. Okay.
So the bullet was so old that they were actually able to narrow it down to a specific weapon.
Damn.
What was challenging for the investigators was they didn't know why Jerry was in the cemetery. He hadn't radioed in his location. So if he was like going to check something out, it's usually customary when they're on a call, when they're going to check something out, when something doesn't seem right or suspicious, they'll call it in. They'll call in their position.
Yeah.
So the reason for the scene Sergeant Niesler found is a really big question mark. Like
Hmm.
to this day, nobody knows what drew him to the cemetery or what caused him to get out of his car.
Yeah.
It would seem he was caught by surprise because his car was running, his flashlight was on the ground next to his body, and his gun was snapped in its holster. Again, obviously he didn't try to draw it. But the autopsy also revealed that Jerry had been shot twice in the back of the head,
Oh, shit.
which is why I say there had to have been blood.
Yeah. How would you have not? Because he was face down, right?
Face down. Yep.
So how would they? Yeah. There-
So I'm sure there was blood. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that's the reason why Sergeant Niesler reacted so quickly, calling it into his department,
Right. Okay.
because it was obviously not an accident.
Right. It wasn't a Jerry. Jerry, you good?
Jerry,
You
you okay?
you okay, buddy?
By the middle of the second week of the investigation, authorities had a prime suspect,
Oh.
and they charged Michael Schertz, the Iola police chief.
Damn.
But they didn't charge him with murder. They charged him with misconduct in office and theft of arms.
What?
Yes. Okay. So,
Was he stealing arms for all of his shirts? Is that what you're saying?
nay. Yes. Oh my God. I can't even believe I didn't even put that together. No, they didn't charge him for stealing a whole bunch of arms.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So, according to that Wapaka County news article, this was because during the investigation into Jerry's murder, special agents Louis, I don't know how he pronounces it, Tomaselli and Karopatsky, they both worked for the Wisconsin Department of Justice, who was helping with the investigation.
Okay.
They had discovered that, unrelated to Jerry's murder at the time, Schertz had at some point previously in another case confiscated 2 handguns from a man named Russ Hayden, a 65-year-old that lived in Iola. What caused this to be linked to Jerry's murder, like in a roundabout way, was the fact that these 2 guns were missing from the Iola Police Department's evidence locker, and
Oh.
Hayden identified one of the guns Schertz took from him as a vintage .380 caliber Beretta handgun that Hayden had kept after his time in the military serving in World War II.
Oh, shit.
Hayden
Okay.
further shared that this handgun had ammo in it that was purchased in the 1960s.
Fuck.
So unrelated to Jerry's murder, but while they were investigating Jerry's murder, they learned about this situation that occurred at some point in the past that linked it to Jerry's murder through this gun.
Wow.
So Tomaselli and Patsky, they had carried out search warrants not only on Schertz's home, but at the Iola Police Department, because again, these two guns were supposed to be in the evidence locker and they weren't there. And then they arrested Schertz. So, given that Schertz was the only other full-time officer that would have had access to the evidence locker, and the only other officer that was identified as being in the area at the time of Jerry's murder, Tomaselli and Patsky questioned Schertz about Jerry's murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. They said, "Hey, Schertz, what do you have up your sleeve?" No, I'm just kidding. They were like, "Tell us about these missing handguns. Like, what's going on here?"
Yeah.
And Schertz said, "Well, so here's the deal. Yes, I took them, but I met some dude in a bar in Appleton and I sold him the guns. I don't know who the guy is. I've never seen him again. It was a cash transaction. I never got his name."
Hmm.
Then he told a second story saying, "I took the guns and I destroyed them and then I got rid of them."
Oh,
So he
okay.
gave two different stories, both of them admitting that he was the one that took the guns from the evidence locker.
Right.
Who knows which story was right? Incidentally, the gun that was used to kill Jerry was never found.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that some shady shit is going down with Schertz.
For sure. Yeah. For shirts.
I love that. I love the alliteration. Shady shit's going down with Schertz, for sure. But what they didn't know was whether he was truly involved in killing Jerry or not. They got him on farting around with, stealing firearms and misconduct in office and all of that. But,
Right.
they don't have the smoking gun, if you will, pardon the pun.
Mhm.
So the district attorney on the case, Thomas Maroney, he was from Wapaka County. He launched what's called a John Doe probe on August 2nd, 1985. Do you know what a
Ouch.
John Doe probe
No.
is? I had never
Doesn't
heard of it.
sound pleasant. I don't.
Well, it's not a body probe, so that's good.
Yeah. Whew.
Basically, a John Doe probe is like a secretive investigation to legally suss out potential criminal liability without dragging someone's name through the mud.
Okay.
So, given that it was a police officer that had been murdered, the prime suspect was the police chief. Discretion was, of course, the highest priority, especially when they didn't truly know if Chief Schertz had anything to do with Jerry's murder.
Right.
So they were trying to be really discreet about it. Maroney was quoted in a County Post West article saying, quote, "A John Doe hearing is used to gather facts in a case. It is an investigative tool where the witnesses testify under oath." I
Okay.
thought, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Using this technique is how they learned of the handguns from Russ Hayden, that
Aha.
65-year-old from Iola. And they just were like, pulling on the threads and kind of, talking to everybody. And they sort of discovered this. And that's how and they started to pull on that thread and they had him come in. And that's how they learned about these guns. And he was very specific about this one gun. And they were like, interesting. That lines up exactly with the forensic analysis. Maybe we have something here.
Right.
What's unclear in my research is if the John Doe probe was launched before they learned of the missing handguns, or if they learned of the missing handguns and that's what caused them to launch the John Doe probe. I can't decipher which one came first because the way things are written, it's not clear. And it's not clear to the point where I don't really know. So one of them happened and that caused the other one. Either way, these two things happened in concert with each other. Okay, so they do the John Doe hearing 3 weeks later on August 23rd, 1985. So 3 weeks after the John Doe probe. Schertz found himself in front of a judge for a preliminary hearing on the misconduct charge, the misconduct in office and theft of arms charge that he had been arrested for in late July.
Okay.
His defense attorney, a dude by the name of Thomas Schultz, he waived the preliminary hearing.
Schultz and Shirts.
Yes, we've got Schultz and Shirts here.
Jesus.
We got two
Okay.
Thomases, we got a Schultz, we got a Shirts, we got sugar. There's a lot of shish. So
Sheesh.
I was like, what does waiving a preliminary hearing truly mean? Like, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
so I looked it up. Super duper duper short rabbit hole, I promise, but I actually think it's pertinent to the story. So, high level, a preliminary hearing is used to establish two things: that a crime was committed and that it was committed by the defendant.
Okay.
That's what a preliminary hearing is designed to do.
Okay.
If probable cause is determined, then the defendant will stand trial for whatever misdeed was done. So if in the preliminary hearing, probable cause is established, it goes to trial.
Okay. Like, is that similar to a grand jury?
You just took the words out of my mouth, girl. So
Bam. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
preliminary hearings occur in place of grand juries. So you have one or the
Ah,
other.
okay.
And preliminary hearings happen instead of grand juries when the prosecution files charges by a complaint. And when it's the way in which charges are filed, and that
Oh,
determines whether it goes to a preliminary hearing or if it goes to a grand jury.
interesting. Okay.
When this happens, it's up to, if it goes to a preliminary hearing rather than a grand jury, it's up to the court to determine probable cause, because the court is then taking the place and playing the role of jury as what would take place in the grand jury. So if the court determines that there's probable cause, then you stand trial. Then you go to trial. The burden of proof to establish probable cause is exceedingly low. It's like basically saying, is there a reason to believe that this could have happened? Like, in the world of possibilities, could this have happened? If the answer is yes, probable cause has been established, you go to trial. Very different from establishing beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal trials. So once you get to
Right.
trial, now your burden of proof has gone way, way high. The bar has gone way, way high. So that's the
Yeah.
difference between preliminary hearing. And so if a defense attorney, in this case Thomas Schultz, on behalf of Shirts, he waived the preliminary hearing. He waived it because the idea is, yeah, we're just going to waive this. You probably have enough to go to trial, but you ain't got enough to like get through trial to get. So
Mhm.
we'll take our chances at trial. So we're going to waive the preliminary hearing. So that's
Right.
what he did.
Okay.
So that's what he
Sure. That
did.
makes sense.
And then right after that, Thomas Maroney, the Wapaki County DA, who was acting as the prosecutor, he held a press conference and he told everybody that Shirts was going to be charged with murder.
Oh.
And with that, Shirts was charged with murdering Jerry, and he was held on a $200,000 cash bond.
Whoa.
Now you can imagine the collective community shock here. People were losing their damn minds.
Yeah.
We've got a rookie police officer dead in a cemetery in the middle of the night. We've got the police chief who's now charged with this murder, who was the direct boss of the victim,
And a ruined fucking car show.
and a ruined car show. I wonder if anybody even knew. You know what I mean? I wonder if they even knew that
Hmm.
all this stuff was going on. I don't know what the environment is like when you're usually a community of like 1,000 versus when you have an 85 plus rolling in over the span of 3 days. Like I don't know if it's just mayhem and mischief and just nobody knows what's up and down. I don't know. People are pretty nosy. People can be pretty nosy and keen to understand like when stuff isn't normal and tend
Right.
to pay attention. So maybe, I don't know.
Hmm.
Okay, so now that Shirts has been charged with Jerry's murder, the
Mhm.
preliminary hearing for a potential murder trial gets underway on August 27th and 28th of 1985. So this is the preliminary hearing for the murder trial. The other preliminary hearing was for his misconduct in office and trial theft of arms.
Okay.
That was that preliminary trial hearing. This preliminary hearing is for if this is going to go to murder trial.
Okay.
And when this preliminary hearing gets underway, less than favorable things start to come to light regarding how Shirts
Ugh.
felt about Jerry.
Oh,
Turns
fantastic.
out, Shirts was kind of gunning for Jerry. Pardon the pun.
Oh, I was like,
He didn't like,
too soon.
yeah, he didn't like him. He wanted him out of the Iola Police Department. According to that Wapaka County News article, a part-time police officer in the town of Lawrence, which is about an hour from Iola, so they all talk. It's a small community.
Yeah.
So this part-time police officer, his name was Roger Miller. He testified at the preliminary hearing that Schertz was, quote, frustrated after several failed attempts to fire Mork.
What the fuck?
Schertz had recommended another person for the position, but the Iola Village Board had voted to hire Mork instead. So these are appointed positions, not hired into positions. Roger Miller also testified that Schertz told him that, quote, if Mork were ever found dead, he would probably not work too hard to find who did it. He also
What the
recounted a
fuck?
conversation he had with Schertz, where Schertz told him, quote, if he couldn't get the board to reprimand Mork or discipline or possibly dismiss him, that he might just have to cut his throat.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yikes. That's pretty damning. According to a Chicago Tribune article dated August 25th, 1985, both Schertz and Jerry were respected police officers, though they were very, very different from each other. And where Jerry was genuinely liked, Schertz was more respected than liked. He was one of those.
Gotcha.
While Jerry was a rookie with 8 months of service when he was gunned down, Schertz had been on the force for 14 years, with most of those years as the police chief in Iola. It is said in this article that, according to residents, quote, Schertz had established a reputation that matched his appearance. Big, beefy, and no nonsense, tending to enforce rules toughly, whereas Jerry was, quote, a sweetheart who seemed to prefer listening and solving problems over forcing submission. So we've got the big bear of a police officer who doesn't like the sweetheart police officer that was his subordinate and was doing everything he could to get him fired. Basically, it comes down to Schertz didn't like Jerry. Now, does that mean he killed him?
And people like you better than me. I've been doing this way longer than you, and everybody likes you better. Meh.
And also, maybe there was a power thing going on here, being the police chief of a small community for so many years, over a decade. Maybe it went to his head. I don't know.
And there's probably a little bit like, you're only here because of your dad, and, just
maybe, yeah.
Bullshit.
Well, and he was on the force for 8 months. Like, he graduated from the police academy, and then he was appointed the job at the Iola Police Department. He had been on the job for 8 months. It takes years to become a really seasoned, good police officer. And so, sure, he made mistakes. He being Jerry, I'm sure he made mistakes. He wasn't perfect, but he was, by all accounts, a decent and an effective police officer.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Okay.
So, Schertz's murder trial got underway on Tuesday, December 3rd, 1985. In Eau Claire, which is a several-hour drive from Iola.
Yeah.
The trial was moved to maintain as impartial of a jury as possible. The news coverage on this was massive. It was massive, especially the nature of the case involving two police officers, one being charged with the murder of the other. This case was massive. It had really rolled the community, and so they were really trying really hard to keep all of the jury as impartial and protected as possible because it wasn't sequestered.
Okay.
All the salacious things Schertz said about Jerry came out again in the trial. Came out in the preliminary hearing, came out again in the trial. Witnesses testified that Schertz had reportedly said Jerry would, quote, someday be shot because he was an ineffective officer.
The hell?
It was a tough case to try for the prosecution. There was no evidence directly linking Schertz to the murder. No eyewitnesses to the shooting, no supposed confession to a friend, no DNA, no fingerprints, no nothing. They didn't have a murder weapon. They didn't have any video surveillance. Unfortunately, when this happened, it was 1985. The investigative tools that everyone had at their disposal at the time wasn't like what we have today. Like, they didn't have DNA, they didn't have cell phones, cell phone tracing, CODIS, APHIS. None of that stuff was available. At least I don't think CODIS and APHIS was. And if it was, it wasn't widely used.
Right.
Now, there was some circumstantial evidence that would make you raise your eyebrow. Specifically, the eyewitness seeing two police cars turning onto State Highway 161, a loud bang a few minutes later, and then seeing Schertz drive by a few minutes after that, seemingly from the direction of the cemetery. It's speculative, but it's there. That's what makes it circumstantial.
Yeah.
Who knows where all of the really mean and damning things Schertz allegedly said about Jerry. But really, who knows where Schertz drove from that night. He was also on duty, so who knows?
Yeah.
And also the question I had was, why did the eyewitness say that they only heard the sound of one loud bang when Jerry was shot twice in the back of the
Yeah.
head?
I thought that too. When you said that, I was like,
So again, very circumstantial. During the trial, the defense called witnesses that contradicted each other. So the defense has
oh,
their issues too. Security guards working the Iola Old Car Show testified that they saw and spoke to Schertz around 4 a.m. They saw him leave the show grounds a little after 4 a.m. and then saw him return around 4:30 a.m. Whereas Schertz himself and 3 of his family members said, "Nope, I was home by 4:10 a.m." So
hmm.
unless he has mastered the ability to be in two places at one time, he was either
Right.
home or he wasn't. We've got some contradiction here. The
Yeah.
prosecution claims that it was clear Schertz had killed Jerry using the circumstantial and indirect evidence. But we all know juries don't like circumstantial and indirect evidence. They want to see the
Correct.
fingerprint, they want to see the DNA. The DA, Thomas Maroney, stipulated, so this was the prosecutor, that the motive was simple. Quote, Schertz killed Jerry because he was frustrated with his failure to have Jerry fired. That was the motive that DA Maroney put forth.
Jesus.
Maroney said Schertz had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to kill Jerry, ending with, quote, common sense will tell you that there will rarely be an eyewitness to a murder. The trial lasted 2 weeks. 70 witnesses were called.
Damn.
220 pieces of evidence were entered. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 15 minutes. They
Okay.
returned a verdict. What do you think?
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Whoa.
Another separate independent investigation led to Schertz firing as the Iola police chief. So there was an independent investigation that ruled, I believe, and I'm speculating here because that's not reported, that ruled that he had misconduct in office basically. And so they
Gotcha.
fired him. A
Wow.
second jury trial on the charges of misconduct and theft of firearms ended in an acquittal. So it was
Damn.
only because of that independent investigation, by whom? I don't know. For what? I don't know. But that independent investigation, and it might have been internal, maybe IA, I don't know. That's what led him to lose his job as police chief.
Okay. Okay.
But the murder trial, he was found not guilty. The jury trial for misconduct in office and theft of firearms, he was acquitted.
Hmm.
So legally, nothing happened to Schertz. The only fallout really was him losing his job and damage to his reputation. That's it.
Wow.
So Schertz sued state and county investigators. Sometime later, after the trials, he sued them. He was like, he was mad. And he lost. So he sued him
Oh,
again. And he lost again. So
okay.
he didn't get anywhere with that.
Okay. Good.
The DA, Thomas Maroney, that prosecuted the case, along with Jerry's family, super supremely disappointed in the jury's verdict.
Yeah.
But you could see it from the jury's side. Like, could you prove beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yeah. I mean, that's
You
a tough
can't.
one. Yeah, that's tough.
I found a post Crescent News article written by Ed Colhane dated Thursday, December 12th, 1985. Now, interestingly, this article was published, it was dated Thursday, December 12th, but it was published before the jury had returned its verdict.
Mm.
And this article was discussing how most of the community didn't think things were looking good for the prosecution.
Oh, okay.
And they expected to see the jury return a not guilty.
Hmm.
One person, though, an attorney who asked not to be identified, felt differently. He said he believed Schertz's testimony would actually help the prosecution. The attorney pointed out that, quote, Schertz has admitted on the stand that he lied to investigators and that he asked a friend to lie to the investigators for him.
Oh,
So
cool.
there's very little specific evidence, or I shouldn't say evidence, specific information in the research as to what exactly happened at the trial. You could pull up trial transcripts and try to wade your way through all of that to pull out little morsels and nuggets,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day there isn't a whole lot of like specifics reported on,
Mm. Okay.
but you can piece it all together. It sounds like Schertz was a shit show.
Yeah.
because he was
A shirt show.
lying. Yeah, he was lying. You know, he was acting in a manner unbecoming of a police chief, basically.
Yeah.
Another article published by UPI, they published an article dated December 12th after the verdict had been delivered.
Okay.
And in that article said, quote, Schertz cried uncontrollably for 5 minutes after the verdict was read while the Mork family sat still, apparently stunned by the decision.
Mm.
So, and I was like picturing that courtroom and how it must have been so fucking emotionally brutal
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing for both families, right? Both
Right.
sides. And then when the verdict was read, which I don't necessarily think that the jury got it wrong, because I just don't think there was enough evidence, direct evidence, to link Schertz to the crime.
Right.
Anyway, after leaving the courthouse, Schertz was quoted as saying, quote, I thank God the people of Eau Claire had the perception to see the investigation for what it was. The most unscrupulous and biased investigation I have seen in my law enforcement career. I think
Okay.
that's a little much, but.
Yeah.
And that is the very tragic case of Jerry Mork, who left
Wow.
behind two littles, ages 6 and 2, and a
Mm-mm.
wife and a family that loved him very much. And he did really good things in this world. So what do
Yeah.
you think? Do you think Schertz did it?
Yeah.
You do?
Oh, yes, I do. I think that with the number of people that were there, that would be like somebody would have said something. Somebody would have seen something if it was anybody else but him. I think that there probably was a call that was made that he said, meet me at the cemetery or whatever, and called him out there and thought this is the perfect weekend to do it because there's a ton of people here. Could have been anybody. I don't know. It just seems a little too suspicious to me.
Yeah, and if he was following Jerry to the cemetery, Jerry pulled into the cemetery driveway first, got out. Obviously, he would leave his car running because he was just meaning, and he pulled in after. Maybe he was surprised because he got two in the back of the head. Or maybe he wasn't surprised and he knew who the person was, but he felt comfortable that he was safe and he turned his back to him. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he did it too. I do. So, what's really cool is that a bronze statue was erected the summer of 2012 at a dedication ceremony in front of the Wapaka County Law Enforcement Center to memorialize Jerry. So now
Okay.
there is a permanent bronze statue that sits out in front of that law enforcement center to memorialize him. And
Aw.
it was in 2012, which was 27 years later after he
Gotcha.
was
Wow.
killed.
Man. Just senseless. Absolutely senseless.
He seemed like a really nice guy. He seemed like a guy that truly like lived to help others. I mean, like, there's a lot of people that are in law enforcement and the fire service and, teachers and stuff like that. These are community serving roles, and they don't, there's a lot of people that are just rotten people that are in these jobs too, but most people that are in these types of jobs, it's because they truly want to serve. They truly want to leave the world a better place than it was when they got there. So,
Right. Yeah, this is just one of those frustrating cases that you really wish you knew what the hell happened. And it was unfortunately a time where there weren't cell phones. And so that, nobody could ping who was where, or if Shirts made a phone call that was like, hey, dude, meet me at the cemetery. I just wanted to run something by you.
yep.
Whatever it might have been. A lot of times cops, when things are slow, have like their one little spot that they go to and eat
Yeah.
a sandwich or whatever. Like maybe that was kind of his known spot that he went to just sit and chill for a few minutes and take a little break. And Shirts took advantage of that. It's just, I wish I knew what got him there, why he was there.
I think that he was definitely, I think he was caught by surprise.
Yeah.
I think it was caught by surprise.
Oh, for sure. If you get shot in the back of the head and you haven't drawn your pistol or even like,
Unsnapped the holster.
yeah,
Yeah.
to access it, that whoever was there, he wasn't threatened by, he wasn't, had no idea that they were capable of putting two bullets in the back of his head.
Yeah.
and he must have just been walking back to his vehicle after having a conversation with somebody, would be my guess. Someone he knew.
Otherwise, he wouldn't have turned his back.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I mean, maybe he went up
wasn't
there.
threatened.
Yeah, maybe you're onto something. Maybe that was his hidey hole spot. Very few people would go rooting around in a cemetery at 4:00 in the morning, so it would be nice and peaceful. Maybe shirts pulled up behind him, and because it's so flippin' dark in a cemetery, Jerry got out of his car with his flashlight and walked back to the car, exchanged a few words, turned around, and was shot in the back of the head.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but
because it was face down, so he fell on his front.
Yeah,
which would make sense, getting shot in the back of the head.
Right.
I read in an article that someone that knew the case was really hoping that maybe somehow, some way, with the advent, where we are today with all of our investigative tool technology, that DNA or something, somehow, some way, we can get some kind of forensic evidence that can point to who did this to Jerry. This is a tough one, and I feel really sorry for those kids.
I know.
And his wife, but mostly the kids. They grew
Yeah.
up without a dad. They grew up without him.
Right.
Anyway, so that's the story of Gerald Mork.
Well, thanks for telling that one and bringing me way down.
Well, then on that note, goodbye, Jamie.
Goodbye, Carrie. Did you know that you smell different when you're awake?
That just gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Creepy, huh?
Yeah.
You're the boss.
Oh my god, it doesn't want anything.
I'm an asshole.
Oh my god, it's a game changer.
She's a fucked up turd, man.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
That'll do, donkey.
Everybody's fucking fine, okay?
Dick.
What a surprise.
You only live once. Just kidding.